Joining me now, Congressman Dean Phillips, a Democrat out of Minnesota. He is on the Financial and Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good to be with you, Philip.
First, I want to get your reaction to the president's veto. Could the House conceivably get enough Republicans here to join together to override that veto?
Well, the old Republican Party certainly would override this veto. And as you know, a number of Republicans had peeled off and, in my estimation, done the right thing. It is time for Congress to reassert itself. We need checks and balances and a co-equal branch of government. We will see, and it'll be a fascinating outcome. But my hope is that they will see the light, if you will, and do the right thing.
What do you think, what kind of message do you think those 12 senators who voted against President Trump's declaration here, what kind of message do you think they sent to the White House?
I think they sent the message that most of us have sent, which is this is overreach, and it is incumbent on us to protect the Constitution, and I honor that and value that, and my hope is that those 12 senators might inspire some others to join them so that we can override this, and again, reassert congressional oversight and co-equal branch of government. It is integral to our country's future, and it is time that we do that again.
What do you think about that number, 12? Do you think that, were you surprised that it was as many as 12, or can you not believe that there weren't more than 12?
Frankly, I can't believe there are not more than 12. I do have respect for the Republican platform of the old days, and in those days, this would have been a no-brainer. In fact, it wasn't long ago when most Republicans were offended by President Obama's efforts in similar capacities. So I'm surprised it's not more. I'm hoping it will, and time will tell shortly.
All right, let's talk about the New Zealand incident there, the tragedy. The president responded to a very direct question about the rise of white nationalism. He essentially said it's not a rising problem. What is your assessment of his assessment of why he responds the way he does?
My assessment is he could not be more wrong. It is so clear that we are facing not just a national crisis, but now an international crisis. Hatred has no boundaries, and terrorism knows every color, race, and religion. It is clear. And it is incumbent on not just members of Congress, but everybody in this country and around the world to start recognizing our own humanity. It is time for communities to come together and start taking steps to heal, celebrate differences, respect one another, because it is our responsibility as human beings, and now it is not just a national issue, it's an international issue. I'd like to see more leadership from our president to recognize that and start taking the lead in ending hate in all of its forms.
Yeah, what about our role internationally? How important is the U.S. voice in stemming the tide of white nationalism around the world?
Well, I'm dismayed that we are no longer sitting at the front of the table in a lot of issues around the world, including trying to end hatred in all these forms. I'd like to see the president lead. This is a remarkable opportunity for America to reassert itself as a place of decency and respect and goodwill. Now that New Zealand has been struck, which is a peaceful nation, I think there were more murders in the mosques just a couple days ago than there were in the entire year in New Zealand. It is, this is a disease that is now spreading throughout the world, and we have a responsibility as Americans, every single one of us, in our daily lives, and certainly from the president and from the White House, to take the lead in expressing our values. If we don't do so, I have grave fears about the future.
I want to talk about the question of impeachment. Earlier this week, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi suggested she was not in favor of impeachment, yet there were quite a few investigations being pushed by Democrats in the House, and some have suggested the president committed impeachable offenses. So where do you stand on that?
I stand in the same place I have stood now for a couple of years, and that is we've got to wait for the Mueller report to conclude and be presented. Impeachment, the gravity of impeachment is significant, and we have to recognize that. And I want facts to drive the outcome. I think whether we're talking Democrats or Republicans, we all have the responsibility to see the facts presented. I hope they're forthcoming soon, and then only cross that bridge when we come to it. But talk of impeachment prior to receiving that, I think, is premature, and I'm being cautious, as we should be. Once that's presented, if there are impeachable offenses, if he did commit crimes that he knew he was committing, we have a responsibility to protect the Constitution and proceed with impeachment proceedings, and that's exactly what we'll do. But to talk about that ahead of that, I think is irresponsible.
You spoke with Politico about Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as well as Representative Ilhan Omar. And you said, quote, suddenly an entire party is being branded by the perspectives of two of its members who represent 1% of the caucus. What did you mean by that?
Well, I mean, you know, we live in a social media era, a digital era, and there's a transition occurring, and I don't think it's an unhealthy one at that. But there are a lot of stories to be told in Congress, and whether it is a couple people in our caucus or a couple people in the Republican conference that have a lot more social media following and a lot more attention, that doesn't necessarily mean that they represent the entire party. The beautiful thing about the Democratic caucus is the breadth of perspective and opinion. It's a big tent, and there are a lot of voices. I respect those. There are also a lot of other voices that I think should be heard, and being branded by just a couple people is not quite appropriate.
Give us a sense into the dynamic there between the battle that's kind of the war that's being waged within the Democratic Party from the extreme left here to more the centrist. What are the dynamics? What does that look like since you were there?
Oh, and it's not a battle. It's actually quite healthy. It's exactly how we should be operating, which is inviting new voices to the tent, letting those voices be heard, sharing ideas. I celebrate ideas wherever they come from, the left, the right, the center, and I think this is a very healthy dynamic. We've got a remarkable freshman class that I should point out as well, a diversity of opinion on both sides of the aisle. And it's a healthy debate, and that's exactly how we should be conducting our politics. I'd be much more fearful if there weren't ideas and bold prospects and initiatives that are being presented, and I celebrate that.
I'm curious to know how you think what Democrats can take from Donald Trump's winning campaign in 2016 going forward, because you've said some things, you've said some things about how the success of it. What do you think Democrats can take away from that?
Well, I think Democrats can take away something quite simple, which is listening. It is incumbent on all of us who represent to start listening to people. I think Donald Trump recognized that and gave voice to people that felt unheard, that felt disenfranchised. As you know, we just passed H.R. 1 in the House, which is a bill designed to do one thing, which is to bring power back to people, to voters. And that is a responsibility. I think it's time for the Democratic Party to start looking at its brand, become listeners. There's one thing that connects every one of us, Philip, in the Democratic caucus. It's truth, justice, and opportunity for all. We have divergent opinions on certain policies. We come from different life experiences, backgrounds, but we do share all those values. But it begins with listening. If we don't start listening to people more, we're going to be in grave trouble. And that goes for Republicans and Democrats, and I hope to inspire more of that.
All right, Congressman Dean Phillips of Minnesota, thank you for your time.